Sorry I'm a little late. This is a lot of work. All right, so this section is when I was on the horse farm in Australia. Get the lights. Oops. Come on. Okay. Yep. All right. I signed up to go on a week-long trip. It was in Mount Beauty, Australia, which is where The Man from Snowy River was filmed. I really just absolutely adored that movie. The scenery was incredible. As it turns out, so was this trip. The way that I got to the trip was a little bit unnerving. I had been in another little town. It was Easter Sunday. I decided to get dressed up, and I never wore makeup very often at all when I was there, but it was Easter, so I put makeup on. I put my hair over to the side. Then I had to hitchhike out of that town over to Mount Beauty. I got in a ride with a bunch of people that turns out were drunk. There were 6 blokes. Oops, that's all of us. I want to get that one back. There were 6 blokes, guys, in the car, and 1 bird, as they call them in Australia. She was not super drunk, and the driver wasn't, but they were making a lot. There's our little crew. There were, I don't know why they all seem to be a little fake today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 10 of us and 2 of the guides. Anyway, they were making some really obnoxious comments, and then they let me out in the middle of the woods and said I needed to go through this path and across the mountains to get to this other section. I got out and just kind of started walking that way because I had no idea where I was. Then they started going backwards and hollering stuff, and it was very unnerving. But I just kept walking like whatever. Another car, they left, and then another car came down that little gravel road, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to get in another car, but they were really packed in there, and the driver, he puts it in park, gets out and opens the boot, which is what they call the trunk, and I'm thinking, do you want me to get in there? What? But I had my backpack with me, so we put that in there. They turned out to be really nice. They gave me some Melbourne bitters, which was good. Then I managed to get over here to Mount Beauty, and I really just fell in love with it. I was on this Arabian horse, so he had a lot of jitters in him, which I really appreciated. We got along really well. He didn't like being still. We had some people on our trip that were afraid of open spaces, agoraphobia, I believe is what it's called. Anyway, it was pretty bold of her to go on this trip because, as you can see, we were way up on the top. Sometimes we were, riding down in the valley. There was one trip where one day we had to go up a pretty steep hill, and it was very woodsy and rocky. The lady in the very front, she was walking up she was on her horse. Her saddle hadn't been tied on well, so it came off, and she slid right off the back end of the horse and landed on the ground on her saddle. Another lady, her horse got all kind of spooked and rolled with her, but she jumped off, and so she just got a sore leg. The lady that was scared of heights just decided to get on off, even though she was on absolutely the calmest horse. My horse was kind of at the back end of all this, and he was really impatient, so he just took off and went straight up the hill, and I had a really fun time getting up there. The landscape was just varied so much. There was one day we saw some emus. There are two of them, and another guy and I took off on our horses and just went chasing across this kind of a field wide open as fast as our ponies would take us, going after those emus. And those emus disappeared before we could even get anywhere close to them. They were running, of course, they don't fly, but they were faster than our little horses were, or they had a pretty good head start too. There are all these little huts up there in this area of the mountains in Australia. They're emergency huts, very similar to the ones in the Appalachian Trail, and also in the, watch your eyes, I'm just going to let it go white, because I got two of them in there together. Out west, they also have those same type of huts that if you're up there and you're caught in the snow, you can go. These were all built by the horsemen. I bought a book when I was over there, Horsemen of the High Country. They had built all these huts in the 1800s, which is really old for Australia. But some people would sleep in there. We had our tents. I slept as frequently as possible out on the ground. But as you might be able to see, there's got a lot of frost. So I'd wake up and my sleeping bag would be really pretty wet. But the stars in Australia are incredible. It was worth getting wet just to lay there and see the southern sky. Woke up one morning early and went over, walking around, and found this incredible scene. Those were the mountains, and we were up above them, and the fog had come in, and it was filling in the valley, and these were all just looking like it was the sea. It was so gorgeous. This is the big horse the lady was on. It was very calm, very quiet. So we had some paths on occasion, but not always. The horses we covered in the blankets at night and fed them with their little feed bags. They didn't have any animals that we were nervous about coming and getting us, which was nice. I fell for all these really crazy eucalyptus trees. They were so fascinating looking. We've got some more in here, I don't know where. The other thing that's really cool, or I should say, another thing that is really cool about, there's the eucalyptus ones. Let me take that one out. We'll go to these. I'll get back to that. So the eucalyptus trees have so much color. That's their bark. It has just like this texture of skin in it and all these colors. They're very fire resistant, very strong trees. They can end up taking over an area because they have such great capabilities. So that's one of the reasons that Australia has such a huge number of eucalyptus, as well as an incredible variety of them. They're extremely well suited for their landscape. Another morning, it was very misty in a location where we were camping. I got up and just got to see this mystery. Then you'd hear these crazy cockatoos and birds and parrots making noises up there, and it was magical. Looks like the streams, but it's the mountain. So what I was going to say is, let's see if I can get this going the right direction. So up at the top of the mountains there in Australia, they kind of have this tundra look because they are the highest. So they follow the same pattern that the mountains in Europe do, where the base is got a lot of different types of trees and plants, and then you get up and it's just a little bit of scattered trees. Then you get above the tree line, then you get up to this tundra area, And that's exactly what it does in Australia, even though it's, I don't remember, it's only several hundred, maybe a couple thousand feet above sea elevation. So you're not really going very high up, but it's not the, it's not the, and that's a really pretty picture, the actual elevation, it's the change and how much it changes from one location to the next that enables it to have the same properties that it does in the Himalayas or in the Swiss Alps. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people that I met. So when we finished the trip, I asked if I could stay. Oh, my little slide projector. Don't go out on me. That's the different cattlemen still maintain these huts. There's our motley crew. Okay, so when we finished this trip, I asked them if I could stay because I really, really loved it, and they said yes. This is from the place that I stayed in. It's Mount Beauty, Victoria. I used to write my friend Judy, and all I did was put her name, care of the post office. It was so small. I tried to work at a bar there, but their glasses all have their own name, and I never could quite get it. So I tried that for 2 days, and then I decided I was not that important. They had cattlemen that still ran the cows. So this is one morning I woke up and they were running them across. I would take the horses and kind of exercise them, feed them. Tally, my horse that I like to ride so much, the entrance down into the feed area was a really hard slope. He came running down at one time and obviously slid. It was muddy and rainy. The barbed wire fence went right between the two the breast muscles of his legs. You could put your hand in past your wrist, but it didn't slice any of his muscles. It just split them apart. So he came out and stayed in the paddock in front of our house there. I'd take care of him and walk him around so he wouldn't get all stiff. And eventually I was able to ride again. I'd take other horses out. So we backed up to the national park. So we could ride just up anywhere into the woods we wanted to. Other times I'd go kind of down through the valley out to this creek that was there. I remember going one time on a full moon. I had the saddle on. I was bareback and just walking down there to the creek was so magical. This is most of the crew there. And Kath was an amazing horseback rider. She had been doing all kinds of tricks and things since she was young. I lost the picture of her. There she is. So one time we would take people out on day trips from the house here during their fall. Calf, I would take some of them by myself. There was another guy that lived in town, Johnny Roper. He would take them out with me sometimes. And then one time, Kath went with me, and she decided that we should we'd go up the mountain, we'd take like lunch, and the billy bread so that we could build a fire and fix them some hot food and tea. Well, we were up at the top and she decided she wanted to find this new path down the mountain. So we were way up the top of a mountain like that and we needed to come down to the valley. She's like, oh, I know where we are. Just go straight down there. Well, we had a father who was taking heart medicine pills. We had his son who was 13 or 14 and the son's friend. We followed Kath down the side of this mountain with no path, and it became extremely steep. I remember we were on the horses at one point, and you could look across. It was a gorgeous fern forest. You could look across and see people, but Kath said we needed to get off because it was too steep and our saddles were really kind of riding up on the horses' necks. So we got off. Then every once in a while you would look out and you'd be able to see some horses' ears, and that was it. It was such dense woods. And I was clinging to my horse when he would jump over things. I'd hang on his neck and let him jump down over all the logs that were falling and everything. It started getting kind of dark. We decided that it was time to, like, we weren't going to make it. We also ran into this, we were down pretty close to the base at the creek, but it was a huge bramble quagmire, like on our side and on the other side. So we had to figure out a way to get through all the blackberries because we couldn't just ride the horses through. We didn't have time to do that. We decided to make a camp. We found a little spot. Kat had more food, and the man that had the heart condition had his medicine with him. The kids were a little nervous, but everybody was still pretty calm about it, considering that this was supposed to have been about a 3.5, maybe 4-hour trip. And we started at noon and it was now dark. So we pitched our little fire, took the saddles off the horses, wrapped the clients up in that. Everybody slept pretty well, woke up the next morning. In daylight, we were able to find a way around the horses, around all the blackberry, and came out on the other side of the hill, and we're heading up. We weren't real far from home, but on the other side of the hill, we saw a posse coming at us. They had rounded up all the riders in the valley because we hadn't shown up. So at first daybreak, they sent about 40 people coming out looking for us. And the group that was in front of us had 12 riders, and Kat and Steve had this holler that they used to do back and forth. So she heard them hollering, and we were hollering back at them. And this is my friend, Johnny Roper. And we all made it back. But it was the very first time I ever had a posse come after me looking because we were lost at the end of the night. And that was living on the horse farm in Australia.